Welcome to Moments with Marianne. I'm so delighted we're spending this time here today. We have a very powerful show coming right up with special guest, Dr. William R. Forstchen, and he's here today to share with us his new book, 48 Hours. Now, Dr. Forstchen is a New York Times bestselling author of the 1 Second After series. He holds a Ph.D. in history from Purdue University with specializations in military history and the history of technology. He has made numerous appearances on Fox News, ABC, CBS, and NBC as a recognized expert in electro-magnetic pulse and CPE events with specializations in military history and the history of technology. He's an in-demand speaker for NASA and STRATCOM and is currently a faculty fellow and professor of history at Montreat College near Asheville, North Carolina. So let's welcome to the show Dr. William Forstchen.
It's a pleasure to be with you today.
What a pleasure it is to have you here and to talk about your new book. How exciting is that? I know your last one was an immediate hit.
Well, the numbers aren't in yet, but it looks like the book is doing rather well at the moment.
Well, so 10 years ago, your book, 1 Second After, was published, and it talked about EMP. And I'd love for you to explain for our audience what an EMP is.
Okay, let's start off with 1 Second After, a book I wrote based upon the congressional reports 2004, 2008, that said America was very vulnerable to an electromagnetic pulse attack. Which at that time, maybe only one person in 100 understood, but it's part of our lexicon now. How it works, you detonate 1 to 3 relatively low-yield nuclear weapons about 250 miles above the United States. It sets up an electrostatic discharge that as it hits the Earth's surface at the speed of light, it goes through all the wiring network of this nation, the hundreds of millions of wires turn into antennas. The overload feeds through. It blows the grid out, literally in 1 second. According to the congressional report, recovery time would take about 5 years, with only 20% of the power grid back at the end of 5 years. And here's the bad one. Upwards of 90% of all Americans would perish within the first year.
Oh my. Those are some pretty staggering statistics there.
Mm-hmm.
When you think about it, especially in this age when people are so attached to their devices. Most people don't even know how to, know people's phone numbers by heart, how to drive from point A to point B. I mean, it would take all that stuff out, right?
Yeah, and, I can imagine many people listening are like, this guy wearing a tinfoil hat, where's this 90% of us are going to die? Well, let's run down, should we call it Maslow's hierarchy. Where are you going to get your water? The average city, the moment the power grid goes off, the pumping facilities and everything, they're gone. High-rise buildings, you're shut off almost immediately. So within a day, basically, the only water you're going to have on hand is what you got in a bottle already. Food. Average community has between 20 to 25 days worth of food on hand. That's from what's in your fridge to what's in the truck backing into the market. Medication. Let's say you're on a crucial medication. You go to the pharmacy, they fill it. The moment they punch that into the cash register, it goes into their computer system. And the following day, a resupply arrives via FedEx. Pharmacies will be down. And then we run down this nightmare list. Command and control, spread of disease, social breakdown. We have very bad die-off starting within a matter of weeks.
Yeah. And it does make, when you break it down, it does make sense that that's something that could happen. So with all of these things that have been brought up, why do you think the government's so slow in kind of taking action regarding maybe updating or securing in a greater way our electrical infrastructure?
That's about the most common question I'm asked. Mm-hmm. And there are times I actually kind of want to warn the host, you better have the delete button ready because it is such a frustrating thing to answer. I wrote this book at the behest of the guy who headed the committee, Congressman Roscoe Bartlett, and a friend of mine in politics, Newt Gingrich, was to get the word out there. Every single member of Congress was handed a copy of that book with a note from Roscoe Bartlett, let's get moving on this. 3 times, as far as I know, federal bills have gotten on the floor, got through the House, and then wound up stalled in the committee. So, I mean, we're in gridlock. We can't agree on a wall. We can't agree on anything. Are we going to agree on this one? It is a very frustrating issue. Estimates on costs for hardening the infrastructure in order to get through an EMP strike. Low end is $5 billion, high end is $50 billion. So if we're going to spend $5 billion on a wall to the south, how about a wall over the top of the United States so we're not wiped out by an electromagnetic attack?
Well, it's really just interesting when we look at, how there's just the government's not really making any progress in the area of looking at this as a serious issue, because it could be too late when they really start addressing it.
Well, let's throw a couple more numbers around. Only about 15% of the primary components in our electrical grid are now manufactured in the United States. Delivery time for the big ones, the big transformer systems, from placement of order to putting it on site takes about 2 years. We cannot even manufacture our own replacements anymore. This would be like on December 1st, 1941, Secretary of the Navy goes in to see the president and said, "It's going to be a war with Japan, but sir, all our planes and 85% of our aircraft carriers are made in Japan. You think we should put in a special order?" That's the kind of position we're in today.
That's a horrifying thing to think of, It should be something that the government's looking at. It's like we need to make some drastic changes here to move this forward so that these things, the infrastructure is in a place where at least we can withstand some of these things that are very probable or possible.
Well, when I wrote 1 second after, I struggled for about a year as to how to put the story or where, and I realized just put it literally in my hometown. 1 second after is set exactly where I live, Black Mountain, North Carolina, the college I teach at Montreat. I was trying to convey what would happen to typical middle America. Now, you get into the urban environment, and the scenario is 10 times worse. People are reacting, but even then, we're not seeing federal action. Other than some aspects of DOD, they are hardening systems within military bases. But state level, nothing. That's why I urge people at the local level, at least for yourself, be prepared to be able to hang on for a month or two for starters. And it doesn't cost all that much to do it.
Well, it seems, we just have some new individuals that were elected into Congress, to the House. It seems like they all should have a copy of 1 second after. I think that would kind of maybe help move some things, as well. Maybe you just need to re-educate some more individuals on what's going on.
Okay, I'll throw in a slight sarcasm here. Maybe if we labeled it as green, this is a green project, maybe then I can think of at least one member of Congress who would support it. We're arguing about you got it. We're arguing about all these other issues on, really, we got a shotgun to our head when it comes to EMP. And then also what I wrote about in my current book related to solar events can do the same thing.
Well, we're going to get to that in a minute. I still have a few other questions here.
Sure. I was trying to see it slightly, but any questions you got, go for it.
Go for it. Yay. Well, and so my thought process is do you think that there's any historical parallels when we talk about asymmetrical, first strikes, and that's kind of what you called the EMP, 1 second after? 1 second after. 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 1 sec
No. Well, yes. When two technology levels, the conquistadors versus the Aztecs. The nearest analogy I can give is some years ago I was sitting on a wall of a fortress in the middle of Mongolia. Don't ask me how I got there. And a friend and I were watching a herdsman herding about 500 horses. Incredible sight. Ground was thundering. And I turned to my buddy and I said, you know, there was a time in history where this is the last thing entire cities would see. Suddenly there's a cloud on the horizon. It's Genghis Khan and friends. And within an hour, that city ceases to exist. But for the casualty levels we're talking about today, the surprise factor, the unpreparedness, there's nothing like it.
Well, and, you know, and I know that you call, you know, it like a first strike weapon that could not just cripple and destroy the U.S. within a few seconds of a war. You know, can you break it down how that would, I mean, it would impact our military as well, you know, or they're still trying to strengthen things? I'm just want to make sure we understand.
EMP was first realized in the early 60s when we detonated a nuke out in space. It's called Starfish Prime. The Soviets did the same thing with what's called Soviet Test 184. People can find that on the internet. Both sides looked at it and went, oh my gosh, this is mad. The acronym from the 50s, mutual assured destruction. You do it to us, we do it to you, we're not going to think about it. Because even if we were EMP right now, out there in the Pacific, Indian Ocean, and Atlantic, there's half a dozen what they call boomers, each of them carrying enough nuclear weapons to pretty well annihilate a fair part of the world. So there would be retaliation. But we're dealing with different players now. You have a madman running North Korea with nuclear weapons. You have the Iranians flat out putting out a video showing them EMPing the United States. And these players might not care about mutual assured destruction. They might see this fulfillment of prophecy, or it's just because I'm having a bad day, I think I'll kill everybody in America. That's the condition the world's in today.
Wow. That's a really scary place to be in when you think about it, because these are things that really should, I would think they would be at the top of every government official's list, like take care of, you know, infrastructure, the electrical infrastructure.
It's because we are used to doing it as cheaply as possible. And, of course, you know, our electrical companies are a private enterprise. There are regulations by the state and feds. But they are private companies. It mystifies me that they are not willing to make the capital investment, or even if the government helps with some of the capital investment to stockpile at least key replacement components. I've been down to Raleigh twice. I'm in North Carolina to testify on this. And it was enraging at the one session where I explained it all out, and a state senator, a real intellectual, chuckled back, oh, I see. We're supposed to base our spending on some third-rate sci-fi novel. Is that it?
Oh, my.
And, yeah, the rest of the people with me that day, including Dr. Pride, the nation's leading scientist on this, there was like an intake of breath. But the lobbyists from Duke were more than happy to go along with it because they don't want to have to spend more money than they have to. They want to keep their dividend level up. Yeah, that was one of those moments, again, where they shouldn't have had a delete button at the podium, because I would have said something.
No, that's a real shame. They had an opportunity that they really missed, and that's really unfortunate.
And it only takes one or two people in key positions like that to kill something.
They're kind of focused on I don't know, other things that maybe they shouldn't really be as focused on. Well, so let's hop over to your new book, 48 Hours. My goodness, you're such a great writer. Once I started reading this book, I could not put it down. Oh.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I mean, it's one of those books you better start reading it on a Friday because you're going to be up all weekend,
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Well, and so for our listeners, because I want to go over some terminology. So what is a CPE? Because I know you talk about that in the book.
Okay, well, I'm actually going to jump ahead on you slightly. CME and then CPE. CME stands for coronal mass ejection. They happen all the time, almost on a daily basis. It is the mathematical probability, though, that one of significant intensity hits this little Earth 93 million miles away. The probability is very low. The last major event was in 1859. What it does is it bends back the magnetosphere, sets up electrical disturbance, and can do the same thing to electronic components. Now, that's bad. But there's something worse, and that's CPE, coronal proton eruption. We do not know how often that happens, but it does happen. It is a different type of explosion that sets out a frightfully high gamma ray burst that if it hits the surface of the Earth, you'll be exposed to thousands of rads of radiation within a matter of seconds. You'll be dead within minutes. Now, obviously, it has not happened recently, but there's a particular circumstance which became my novel. If a CME hit us first, pushed back the magnetosphere, and then within 48 hours, a CPE hits us, that then turns into yet another series of initials, an ELE, an extinction level event. It will wipe out most of life on the planet. And that's what 48 hours is about. Is it going to happen? Are we going to be hit? What are we going to try to do in those last 48 hours if we are going to be hit?
Well, it kind of makes you wonder, is that what took out the dinosaurs,
Yes, and that is a theory now. Mathematical probability, I came across one article said it is higher that we could be clobbered by a CPE rather than all those wonderful sci-fi NASA drawings of this giant rock heading right at Earth. There was a bit of a die-off in the northern hemisphere about 14,000 years ago, but some people speculate might have been a CPE. And there was another one a couple 100,000 years ago, which might have been a CPE.
Well, it seems that you are very good at bringing up some very difficult topics that are there's probability in those happening. They've happened before in the past. They could happen at different levels. So what drives you to write about these topics?
Oh, my depression. I walked into EMP backwards. I went to D.C. to have a meeting with Newt to plan a book about the Civil War, and I wind up doing EMP instead. Last 2 years ago, my publisher is calling me every 2 or 3 days. We want another book. We want another book. We want another book. I've done 3. 1 second after, 1 year after, and Final Day. It was a trilogy. It's complete. I even said, I called it the Final Day to send a message. This is it. There ain't going to be any sequels. Well, they kept hitting me. And the publisher's saying, why not CME? And then as they say in The Godfather, they made me an offer I couldn't refuse. I said, okay, I'll go for it, but I swear this is going to be it. However, when I got into it, I walked right into a wall. Because what's the only difference between writing a novel about CME and EMP? CME, everybody knows it's going to happen 2 days beforehand. Everybody's going to be running up and down the street screaming their head off. The government's going to screw it up. I'm feeding on myself. You know, all of us have loved a particular book series or an author. First 2 or 3 books are great, and then something, by the time you get to 5, 6, or 7, it's like, yeah, you're really kind of milking this, aren't you, buddy? So I didn't want to just go back and play back in that field. And then when I found out about CPE, I was like, oh, my God, that's the novel. This becomes an existential threat to all of humanity. And the fundamental question, I want to make this a very moral book as well in terms of what would we do if we only had 48 hours left, all of us? And might we not realize almost everything we argue about is meaningless compared to this?
You know, and how true is that? I mean, when you look at something where you have 48 hours, I mean, what would you do? What would most people do? I mean, I'm sure there would be some major chaos, but from a personal standpoint, you know, what's important to an individual?
Yeah, I asked a lot of people if you had 48 hours, and the answer was almost always identical. I'd want to be with my friends and family. I said, yeah, you know, I agree. Is that the novel, though? What becomes my plot? People are just trying to drive to get there, and then suddenly, whammo, it hit. About 99.9% of the population might perish. That still leaves about 300,000 people who might be able to survive. How? Because since the 1950s, our government has been building very, very deep bunkers in the event of nuclear war. There's a big one right outside of Gettysburg, Side R. Now, if we were going into a nuclear war right now, there'd only be minutes to evacuate government leaders to those facilities to keep things going. Now here's the plot of the book. We don't have 30 minutes to decide. We have 48 hours to decide. Who goes into the bunkers to survive and who stays outside? And just because you're governor or mayor or chief of waterworks, does that automatically give you a ticket? Or are you going to stand back and give your ticket away? So that becomes the book. Who gets the chance at survival? Who does not?
It is a good read, I'll tell you. Like I'm saying, and for you know, what's great about this book is that it could be very much. I mean, you've written 3 books that talk about similar topics, but the books themselves are not similar in any way. So this is, people can pick up 48 hours, start reading it, and then go back and read the other books. You know, it's not like they're being left off anywhere.
Thank you for saying that, because more than one person has assumed it's just a continuation of the OSA series, 1 second after. No, this is an entirely different standalone book, and it's a relatively short book. It's not some 300,000 word tome. I want to make it short and sharp as to what was going to happen.
So, you know, we talked a little bit earlier about asteroid strikes or comets and the possibility of that happening, you know, and the damage that could kind of hit the planet with, as opposed to, you know, CPE. So when we look at these different things, why do you think the media and the public so focused on asteroids or comets?
Bang. It's one hell of an explosion, isn't it?
Back to the Big Bang Theory, are we?
No, is that not the answer?
I guess.
Boy, that asteroid's coming, look out. And, of course, everybody's waiting to see the tidal wave that knocks over the Statue of Liberty, or, you know, the explosion going up through the atmosphere. It's cinema. So it's a bit, what comes to mind is that line, this is the way the world will end. with a bang and not a whimper. The world going out possibly from a 48-hour event is going to be very quiet. If you're out in the open, within minutes, the radiation level will knock you down, and you're gone. And there'll be some people, perhaps, now I'm not saying it's going to definitely happen, but there could be some people underground who might survive. But the whole asteroid thing, it just makes cool cinema the first 5 or 6 times you do it. By the way, I hated the movie Armageddon, where they blow the thing up and it goes around the planet at the last second. Whoever thought that one up? Deep Contact is the one on that. Deep Impact is the only good one. So, yeah, they always want the massive explosions. Or why is it when aliens invade us, they chase us around with ray guns and shoot us one at a time, rather than just nuke the whole planet and go away?
That is, you know what? Because that makes the end of the story is why.
Yeah, okay. They just nuked us. It's over. Goodbye. Aliens win. Go out, high five. Let's go on to the next planet to ruin.
Yeah, it kind of ends the story. So, yeah, I can understand that. You know, that makes a whole lot of sense. People are into it's an asteroid. It could possibly hit us, the drama of all that, as opposed to something that they may not really be able to visually see, you know?
Mm-hmm. What, if we were hit by CPE, what you would see in the final moments would be an ever-increasing brightness, almost like staring into a headlight. The luminosity of the sun would increase. In the same way, did you see the total eclipse last year?
Oh, yeah.
Remember how the lighting started to get kind of strange about 20 minutes before, and then started getting cooler, and it's like, you just got that creepy feeling. Something really weird is happening with the sun, even though you know what's going on. Well, this would be the reverse.
Yeah, my dog didn't want to go outside, so I get it.
You can go out. I'm not. There's something strange going on out there.
Not having it. Oh, my goodness. Well, do you know, and this kind of leads me to my next question for you. I mean, a lot of people, there's been this like whole movement of people that are prepping, you know, for the prepper movement where they're, you know, creating food that will last 20 years, or I think even like Costco a while back was selling, you could buy 120 days worth of food, or, you know, MREs, different kind of MREs out there. So do you think that your book kind of triggered that? Because there's some people that are saying that could have happened. Do you agree, or was that always kind of there?
It's kind of in there, but it exploded. Yeah, friends joked that I should have asked one of those companies for like some shares. I'll do some advertising for some shares. I just want to differentiate one thing. Unfortunately, the public, because of that rotten TV show, automatically picture preppers as a bunch of nut jobs. All right? They're not. They are ordinary citizens. Maybe you are. I am. We're trying to think ahead. The creepy ones are what I call the survivalists. They're the ones that are in their little bunker somewhere up in Wyoming, breathing heavy, sounding like Peter Warries. I can't wait to see them all get it. And they almost want to see it happen. Preppers are just ordinary citizens. They're thinking ahead, and they're being smart. And as you build up your individual stockpile, a question, when I'm talking to groups, I say, what are you going to do if on day 27 your neighbor knocks on the door and he's got his 2 kids? And your neighbor says, the heck with me, but could you give a meal to my boys? You know, you have to think about things like that as well. You know, what are the best things that we can do, not only for ourselves, but for those around us? I've been to dozens of conferences. I have a very deep respect for anybody who's out there prepping.
You know, and it makes a lot of sense with all the natural disasters that we've had. being for people that do prep ahead of time, having something in place. I mean, it's almost like, accepting personal responsibility of what could happen and just being prepared. You're going to be able to take care of yourself,
Do you remember when Sandy hit New York 5 years ago, 6 years ago? The big hurricane that hit New York City. It happened where I grew up. Did a lot of damage. I was out of touch with some of my friends who are preppers, united together. They took care of things. But the reason I mention it is Diane Sawyer out there being emotional for us is interviewing a woman who's crying. My children and I have not eaten in over a day, and the apartment is freezing, and da-da-da-da-da, all right? And at the very end, Diana said, of course we made sure Mrs. Smith got 10 gallons of water and 3 days' worth of food and extra blankets. And I wanted to scream to that woman, hey, lady, are you stupid? 5 days before the storm hit, they told you it was going to hit. 3 days out, 2 days out, they say, this is going to be a really bad one. Get ready for it. At the very least, she could have filled her bathtub up with water. So they had some drinking water or water to flush her toilet with. It is amazing how many people stand there, let it hit, and then wring their hands the day after and say, oh, somebody please save me. Come on, we're Americans. I'm super patriotic. We are Americans. We can take care of ourselves in anything.
Mm-hmm. I have to agree with you. What's interesting is the last couple hurricanes that have happened on the East Coast. It's out on the East Coast, and they're talking about it being a direct hit. It was going to be a 5, and people were just really not preparing. Like most of the people, when we talk to people that had been in the area a long time, they're like, oh, we'll be fine. It's okay. It'll blow over. So there's a sense of complacency because they figure, oh, it's just not going to happen to me, when it very well could.
Well, there was a storm hit Washington, D.C. about 4 or 5 years ago. They called it Godzilla or something. It was a humongous, level 8 thunderstorm. It blew out the grid of D.C., took it down for 4 or 5 days.
Wow.
Damage everywhere. I call up Newt, and I said, it's the perfect time for an op-ed. So we wrote an op-ed that went into, I think it was the Washington Post. And it just simply said, take a look at what happened to our city when it was without power for only 4 days. Isn't it time we thought about some long-term planning that makes sure that 30, 40, 50, 60 days things can keep going? Why wasn't that? And why haven't we already done that in our capital? And you know what? It was amazing. The reaction we got was basically, pardon the expression, was basically a middle finger. People were writing in saying, yeah, Newt, I bet you were up with your rich friends someplace while the rest of us suffered down here. We got very, very few positive responses of, guys, take a lesson for one, even the power is down for 3 or 4 days. It was very frustrating. But then again, that's the Washington Post.
Well, my goodness, Bill, we could talk for hours on your books, and because you really put a lot of information in them. There's a lot of study that's gone into this, and I mean, I think they're books that everyone should read. It's part of being just prepared.
Well, I keep jokingly tell people that my next book is going to be called Happy Bunny Goes to Town. I'm going to write a happy book. Thank you. Yeah, the OSA, 1 second after, that's about actually being physically prepared. 48 hours, well, you just read it. I think you saw where I was going.
Oh, yeah.
What do you do yourself? What do you do in relationship to your loved ones? If you have children, parents, suppose we're all facing this together. Are we going to do the right thing?
It's a question everyone should sit with and really give some thought to. Well, Bill, where can people connect with you and learn about your books?
In order to get the book, easy enough. You just go to finer bookstores anywhere or Amazon or whatever. And it's out in all formats, audio and ebook.
Well, William, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
It's been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed chatting with you.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Forstchen. It's been such a delight to spend this time with you and to talk about your new novel, 48 Hours. Again, if you'd like to pick up this book, it's available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all indie bookstores. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I would like to thank everyone for tuning in. You're listening to Moments with Marianne. And remember, make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary, a recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Moments with Marianne airs every Sunday, Monday, Thursday, and Friday at 8 p.m. Eastern and 5 p.m. Pacific Time. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.